Oh, Ben, I'm gonna expose you for this one. You're not mentioning a couple of things. So this episode is going to be the first installment of our IDF series, the Intellectual Discourse Files series, in hopes of educating the masses of the Palestine-Israel issue that is happening right now. This video is going to be slightly interesting because I'm going to react. Generally, I don't do reaction videos, but I have to do it for this video because it's annoying. You'll see why. This episode, I'm going to react to a video made by a certain Ben Shapiro, and his video is titled, "You're Being Lied To About Israel and Palestine Facts, Episode 5. In this video, you'll see the intent of Ben Shapiro in how he's presenting history for the Zionist cause. Here's the thing. I hate someone who distorts history. I hate someone who distorts facts. I understand that history is not a 100% perfect science. It's very difficult to piece history back together and get it like 100% accurate. But in this video, you'll see how Ben distorts history so much to the extent that it's difficult for me to assume the best of him. This guy is lying. This guy is lying, and this guy is out to distort history, and he's presenting inaccuracies for the Zionist cause. That's his agenda. So I'm going to call him out for this video. Before that, let's watch the video first, and we'll go through it one by one. Let's go.
The things that we've been seeing on our screens from Hamas are atrocities, obviously. But the media have said that these atrocities, they're really missing context. The context they are providing, well, that context is a bunch of lies.
Yeah, in this video, you're going to see how Ben, he's going to distort history. He's going to so-called break down myths by creating his own myths.
There are 4 myths generally propagated by the left around the history of Israel and the Palestinians. These myths matter because they lead people into a peculiar moral relativism whereby attempted murder or successful murder of Jews is excused, and meanwhile, the evil human rights violations of the Palestinians are minimized. Myth number 1. Israel is historically Muslim territory. This is a pure and absolute lie. Israel is historically Jewish territory.
Now, first of all, if you're gonna tell history, at least be accurate in the terms that you use. At least get that right. I mean, it's your independence of your state. So the state of Israel never existed prior to 1948. It gained independence on the 14th of May, 1948 by David Ben-Gurion, the head of a Jewish agency. So how is it that Israel belongs to the Jewish territory in ancient times when it was only established in 1948? Even from the way he phrased the question, like Israel is Muslim territory. Like that's a weird way of putting it. Territory? What do you mean territory? During the Ottoman Empire, the Muslim did conquer the land of Palestine, and there were Jews, Muslims, and Christians living together peacefully. Like it was Muslim territory according to history. I don't know why Ben phrased the question like this. It's just weird. So anyway, let's just continue and watch the video.
Israel is historically Jewish territory. According to the Bible and certain interpretations of contemporaneous archaeology, Joshua entered the land of Israel in 1400 BC. The Kingdom of David was founded around 1000 BC. The first Temple of Solomon was built in approximately 957 BC. The Second Temple was built in approximately 515 BC. The Hasmonean dynasty was founded in 166 BC. Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 BC, and the Jews exiled from Israel in 136 CE after the defeat of the Bar Kokhba revolt. The Romans, in an attempt to shame the Jews, renamed the area Palestine as an insult after the Jews' historic enemy, the Philistines. Even during the exile, there was continuous Jewish presence in the land. Islam, which is the religion of the Palestinian Arabs, was not even founded until the 7th century CE or AD.
Yeah. Show a picture of a warlike situation and then associated with Islam. Very fair, Ben. Very fair.
No independent Arab state has ever existed in the area known as Palestine.
It's just weird that the way he presents his facts, it's just pathetic. So Ben is trying to prove that, okay, Israel belongs to us because we ruled it in the past. This is what he's trying to prove. First of all, you got the term wrong. It's not Israel, it's Palestine, because Israel was never in existence prior to 1948. That's a historical fact. How could you not know that? Secondly, this argument of, okay, this land belongs to us because we ruled it in the past, it's a weak argument. We call this a logical fallacy. This logical fallacy is named an appeal to tradition. What you're trying to prove is that this item is mine because I used to have it in the past. Right off the bat, you know how weak this argument is, because anyone can claim that the land of Palestine belongs to them. I mean, the Muslims can can claim that the land of Palestine belongs to them because we ruled it in the past as well, which is a pathetic way of putting forth one's argument. It doesn't make sense. It's kind of weird because Ben, in the video, he starts his timeline from 1400 BCE. You want to know why he started that timeline from that era? Because prior to that, the Jews were not the authoritative inhabitants or dwellers of Palestine. It's so obvious that he's trying to distort history. He's trying to make it so specific. He's trying to reduce our scope so that we will agree, aha, oh, the Jews were the dwellers of Palestine. But if you check history, the Jews were not the dwellers of Palestine prior to 1400 BCE. In the era of 1570 to 1544 BCE, which is an era just before, the people there were under the rule of the Egyptian New Kingdom, which covers modern-day Egypt and extends all the way to the Levant, covering modern-day Palestine. And it was inhabited by a group called the Canaanites. Now, the Canaanites, in Arabic, we call it Kan'aniyun. So according to Professor Ann Kilbrew, an archaeology professor at Penn State University, in a book, Biblical Peoples and Ethnicity, she said that Canaan was not made up of a single ethnic group, but consisted of a population whose diversity may be hinted at by the great variety of burial customs and cultic structures. So the Canaanites were non-Abrahamic people. Here you can see why Ben started out his timeline at 1400 BCE, because just prior to that, the land of Palestine was inhabited by people who were non-Abrahamic. So this argument of that, oh, Palestine belongs to us because we used to rule it in the past, it's not a good argument to justify a claim. You should do better, Ben. Let's go to the Bible now. Now, according to the Bible, in Genesis chapter 17, verse 8, it mentions about the land of Canaan, land of Palestine. So it states, the whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession to you. This refers to Abraham and your descendants after you, and I will be their God. So now the Jews will say, aha, see, the land of Canaan belongs to us because the Jews were the lineage of Abraham. But you forgot that the Jews and the Arabs were from the lineage of Abraham. The Jews were from Ishaq or Isaac, peace be upon him, and the Arabs were from the lineage of Prophet Ismail, peace be upon him. Your argument just breaks down from there. So even from the perspective of the Bible, the land of Canaan belongs to the lineages of Abraham, which is both the Arabs and the Jews. And this point about Islam, he's showing a picture of a killing spree and associated with Islam. It's so misrepresented. And it shows that you have a lack of understanding in terms of understanding the difference between Arabs and Islam. Now, Arab is a race, Islam is a religion. And even if, for the sake of argument, let's say if I agree, okay, fine, the land of Palestine belongs to the Jewish people. Now, shouldn't the conquering of the land of Palestine be done in a way that is in line with the Jewish faith, that is in line with the teachings of God or teachings of Moses? i.e., you shouldn't be killing someone, we shouldn't be bombing someone, you shouldn't be massacring and ethnic cleansing to conquer Palestine because it's against your faith. It doesn't make sense. And even if you use that ideology where Palestine is a promised land for you guys and you justify your actions because of that, why is it wrong for someone else to do the same to you? Like if someone does the same, i.e., killing, massacring, bombing you, and etc., why are you getting mad if someone does it to you? So this argument, this myth that Ben is trying to prove, it's a weak argument. I can go on and on, but the video is going to be super long. I'm sorry. So let's continue watching the video.
Myth number 2. Israel is the cause of the failure of land partition in the Middle East. This is, again, a pure lie. In 1917, the British promised the Jews the entire area of Palestine.
What? The British promised the Jews the entire land of Palestine. Where did you get that from, bro? Where did you get that from? You see, here's what Ben is trying to portray. He's trying to portray the British as the hero of the entire situation and the Jews as the victims. And then later on, he's going to present the Arabs as this evil Arabs. Oh, Arabs, they're just out to destroy people. It doesn't make sense for the British to give the entire land of Palestine for the Jews. I mean, who are you for the British to give you an entire plot just specifically for you guys? It doesn't make sense. Coming up to the Brits and be like, hey, can I get the entire land of Palestine? And the British will be like, oh, sure, take it. Would you like a little cup of tea as well, you twat? I mean, once again, please check your facts before you present it. It's annoying because you claim yourself to be an academic, but you twist and turn history. It's history, bro. It's not your story. Wait, did I think of that? You're not an academic if you twist and turn history. You're a pandemic. Oh, 2 for 2. I mean, it's just annoying. It's as if Ben is ethnically cleansing history. Whoa, 3 for 3. Nice. So let me tell you the narrative now. So following the end of the World War and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, now the British was given a mandate by the League of Nations in which they put into effect the Balfour Declaration of 1917, where the land of Palestine, at this point in time, it includes modern-day Palestine and Transjordan, will be used for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people. It doesn't say that the entire land of Palestine Palestine is yours. It doesn't say that. So the British wants to locate the Jews in Palestine. That's the only thing that they want to do. In fact, the term national home had no precedent in international law. So it was intentionally vague as to whether a Jewish state was contemplated. The intended boundaries of Palestine were not specified, and the British government later confirmed that the words in Palestine meant that the Jewish national home was not intended to cover all of Palestine. So this is the mindset of the British at that point in time. The Christians, Muslims, and Jews were living in Palestine during the Ottoman Empire. British wants to continue that because you guys have been living there peacefully, with the exception of more Jews. That's all. And this attitude of the British like giving land to the Jews, I mean, it's an inaccurate portrayal of the attitude of the British at that point of time, because they wanted to get rid of the Jews. That's why you have the Aliens Act. The Aliens Act is a measure enacted by the British Parliament in 1905, which restricted immigration into Britain from areas outside of the British Empire. It is generally believed to have been chiefly a response to heavy East European Jews or Jewish immigration into Britain after 1880. Haha, bet you didn't know this, man. Now, because in the 19th century, there were like 5 million Jews in Russia, and they were persecuted, and they were obliged to live in a place called the Pale of Settlement, where they lived in poverty and so on. So they left Russia, they escaped Russia, and some of them went to the US, some of them landed in the UK. Now, the influx of Jews in Britain peaked in the late 1890s, and they were mostly poor and unskilled. Now, by the turn of the century, there was a media backlash where the British Brothers League organized marches and petitions where they regarded the Jews as destitute foreigners. And according to David Cesarani in his book, The Jewish Chronicle and Anglo Jewry, he mentions that at rallies, its speakers said that Britain should not become the dumping ground for the scum of Europe. Like, they're talking about you guys, and they're referring to you guys as the scum of Europe. This was the attitude of the British people at that point of time, with the rise of anti-Semitism. And it continues that the Manchester Evening Chronicle wrote that the dirty, destitute, diseased, verminous, and criminal foreigner who dumps himself on our soil and rates simultaneously shall be forbidden to land. So that's why they created the Aliens Act, to get rid of the Jews. There was an influx of Jews in the land of Britain. And the future Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, even he was opposed to this bill because he said, and I quote, "It is expected to appeal to insular prejudice against foreigners, to racial prejudice against Jews." So here you understand that the British were getting rid of you guys. And it makes sense in history, because you know what's older than Jewish Zionism? Christian Zionism. The idea of world domination was present in Christendom longer than it was present in the Jewish tradition. That's why this guy over here, Theodor Herzl, the founder of the Zionist movement in the late 1800s, the British offered him a different plot of land. The British offered him Uganda in the Uganda proposal in 1903. Herzl proposed the British Uganda program as a temporary refuge for Jews in Russia in immediate danger. Theodor Herzl was in on the idea of having the Jews populate Uganda. It was already prepared by the British. But later on, the organization, the Zionist organization, rejected the idea and waited for Palestine. So the Zionists at that point of time, they don't believe that Palestine was a promised land. They just needed an idea to globalize it, to gain support from the Jews so that they can conquer a land. That's all. That's the main idea. That's why they had different ideas of getting Uganda, Alaska, Argentina, so on and so forth. They just wanted a land for them to conquer and then grow their dominion from there. Anyways, let's continue.
Area of Palestine. At the time, Israel and Transjordan, which is today's Jordan. In 1920, the Arabs began pogroms.
The Arabs? What the hell? How can someone just calmly say the Arabs? I think Ben Shapiro's depiction of history is like a 7-year-old that only knows 2 words: Jews and Arabs. Like, he's portraying Jews as this angel and Arabs as someone who's inherently evil. The Arabs, what the hell? I mean, this is lazy and unfair biased projection of history. I mean, come on, bro.
20, the Arabs began pogroms, a mass murder of Jews, in Jerusalem, as a sign of anger at the British mandate in Palestine. In 1922, the British government, in response, announced in a white paper that the Transjordan area, 70% of Palestine, would be sliced off and made an Arab state. That would become Jordan.
So now Ben is trying to prove that, okay, fine, Jews, we were given the entire land of Palestine, but riots broke out because the Arabs, they staged pogroms and so on and killed Jews. And because of that, the British had to slice off Transjordan and give it to the Arabs. So this is the idea that Ben is trying to prove. I mean, which is a lazy, inaccurate depiction of history. Because if you look at history, according to UN, again, the question of Palestine, origins and the evolution of Palestine, 1917 to 1947, the decision of the mandate did not take into account the wishes of of the people of Palestine, despite the covenant's requirement that the wishes of these communities must be a principal consideration in the selection of the mandatory. In other words, when Britain was establishing or executing the Balfour Declaration, where they wanted to make Palestine a national home for the Jews, they wanted to give some plot of land for the Jews as a national home in Palestine, not all of Palestine. They did not consult the local Palestinians. They just addressed the concerns of the Jews, but they ignored the local population. And according to Charles D. Smith in his book Palestine and the Arab-Israeli Conflict, A History of Documents, there were some additional changes that were allowed by the British. They granted the request of the Zionists that Hebrew become a language with an equal status to Arabic in official proclamations. The Jewish government employees earned more than the Arab, and the Zionists were permitted to fly their flag, whereas Arabs were not. Many Jews in Palestine acted as if the achievement of a Jewish state was imminent. Just imagine you coming into Palestine and you start doing all these things. You start waving your flag, you start earning more than people. Of course, the local Palestinians are not going to be happy with that. I mean, this is normal human reaction. Ben is trying to depict the situation like this. The Jews were given land by the British, and then they were sitting there like angels, and all of a sudden the Arabs came and had riots and had pogroms and killed Jews. I mean, that's lazy storytelling, bro. That's evading historical facts. Because if you read history in depth, the 1922 white paper in which Palestine was separated into Transjordan and Palestine was largely a reaction because of a riot that broke out in 1921, and they call it the Jaffa riot. So the Jaffa riots were a series of violent riots in mandatory Palestine on May 1st to 7th, 1921, which began as a fight between Mopsim and Ahadut Havoda, two Jewish groups, but developed into an attack by Arabs on Jews. So initially, this riot was there's a string of riots that happened prior to 1922, but the main one to take note of in history is the Jaffa riot, which was started out by Jews. To put the blame on Arabs entirely, I mean, it's just lazy storytelling. It's just deception, bro.
In 1937, the Peel Commission recommended a rump state for the Jews, in which the British would retain control over Jaffa and Jerusalem, the Arabs would get the entire Negev and nearly the entirety of Judea and Samaria, and the Jews would get a tiny swath of territory along the coast, including Tel Aviv and Haifa. In 1939, the British, in response again to Arab pressure, restricted Jewish immigration to Palestine just as the Nazis began.
In response to Arab pressure, once again, you see, oh man, this guy is a joke. In response to Arab pressure, how can the Arab pressure the British? They were under the mandate. They were the controlling powers or the colonial powers at that point of time. Arab pressure. What? I mean, it's just disgusting. It's just the way you described history is just disgusting, bro. So you have to understand the current situation now. You have an uprising of Arab nationalism and Zionism in the mandatory Palestine. So riots broke out because of the glimpse of the establishment of the Israeli state were seen in the distance. So the local Palestinians at that point of time, seeing all of this happen, they had the desire for self-determination as well. So the British, seeing that the riots have broken out and it's difficult to contain the situation, they suggested this Peel Commission in which they divided land, where the Arabs would have a portion of the land, Negev, and whatever that Ben mentioned, and the Jewish people would get a portion of their land as well. Now, the Arabs at that point of time did not like that idea, because why were immigrants given land when we're the ones that have been staying there for many years? The Jews at the same time were split on that idea as well. Some of them were for the idea, some of them were not for the idea. And the two top Zionist figures, David Ben-Gurion and Chaim Weizmann, both favored the trust of the Peel proposals without necessarily agreeing to all of its content. Now, 1939 is when another white paper was published by the British. In 1939, Palestine Statement of Policy. His Majesty government will do everything in their power to create conditions which will enable the independent Palestine state to come into being within 10 years. So this was the response of the British because of how they were intending to control the entire riot situation. They proposed to the local Palestinians an independent Palestinian state in 10 years. So in terms of immigration, British wants to contain the immigration issue. They don't want to allow Jews to enter into Palestine willy-nilly, because Jewish immigrants were entering in Palestine at unprecedented rate, and the local Palestinians were like, wait, why are they pushing for a state of Israel? It should be an independent state of Palestine. So as a result of that, they limit the immigrants, the Jewish immigrants, to 75,000 over the next 5 years. And riots broke out because of that. Let's continue watching. It's annoying the way you present the entire issue.
Nonetheless, the Jews sided with the Brits, the Arabs sided with Hitler.
What? Nonetheless, the Jews sided with the Brits and the Arabs sided with Hitler. I mean, that's just lazy, dishonest, inaccurate misrepresentation of history. He's trying to project, I mean, this is Ben Shapiro. He's trying to pin every single evil development in history to the Arabs, and the Jews were like, oh, we're siding with the British. We're on the good side. I mean, this is just unfair, bro. I'm not saying that there were no Arabs that sided with Hitler. Of course there is. Initially, some of the Arabs sided with the British because they were promised independence once the Ottoman Empire collapses. So it's not untrue to assume that the Arabs sided Hitler. There were some Arabs that sided with Hitler, but to misrepresent and to present the entire issue as if all Arabs sided with Hitler and all Jews sided with the British, it's just a dishonest way of portraying history. Because if you read history, not all Arabs sided with Hitler. This guy that you show over here is Amin al-Husseini, which is the Mufti of Jerusalem at that point in time. He was already exiled by the British and he lived in Berlin. And you're just showing this to give the portrayal that, okay, this guy represents the Arabs and he sided with Hitler, so Arabs are evil people. I mean, come on, Ben. It's pathetic. Because if you read history, the Germans and Hitler in particular repeatedly denied al-Husseini's request for legitimization. He was denied help by Hitler himself. This guy that you're showing on the video, he was denied help from Hitler. Hitler remarked that he wanted nothing from the Arabs. You see, you're portraying as if every Arab is siding with Hitler to exterminate the Jews. This wasn't the case. There were more Arabs who didn't side with Hitler. This is what you left out. A number of Arabs participated in efforts to help save Jewish residents of Arab lands from the Holocaust while fascist regimes controlled the territory. No occupied country in Africa or Europe was free of collaboration with the genocide campaign against the Jews. But this was often more common in European countries than Arab ones. Arab rescue efforts were not limited to the Middle East. For example, the rector of the Great Mosque of Paris, according to different sources, helped from 100 to 500 Jews disguise themselves as Muslims. I mean, these are examples of non-Arab Muslim population assisting Jews to escape from the Holocaust in Europe. Immediately you can see that not all Arabs sided with Hitler. Even those who sided with Hitler didn't want anything to do with them. And there were more Arabs that tried to save Jews because you guys were massacred and treated badly across Europe. So I don't know why you presented this point like that. I mean, it's just lazy.
In 1948, the British mandate ended and Israel declared its independence.
David Ben-Gurion read the Proclamation of Independence to 13 other members of the Israel Provisional National Council. Israel had taken its place among the nations of the world.
In 1964, with the Arabs still in full control of the Gaza Strip and West.
Wow. I mean, what a jump there. From 1937 all the way to 1948 and all the way to 1967 without any mention of any events that happened in between. It's just amazing, Ben. I mean, you're an amazing storyteller. It's very important to mention here what he's trying to do. He's trying to label the Arabs as being someone who's evil. If you look at the map of the land that Israel possessed. This was 1937. This was during the Peel Commission. And then Ben jumped into 1948, where the independence of the Jewish state, in which, wow, look at that. I mean, you guys got a lot of land, huh, Ben? And he made no mention of anything in between. He made no mention of how they acquired all these lands. Nothing rings a bell, Ben Shapiro, nothing rings a bell. The Nakba, 1948, wink, wink. I mean, it's interesting when Ben said that the Jews sided with the British and the Arab sided with Hitler, and then he went all the way up to 1948 where the state of Israel got their independence without mentioning anything. Because prior to that, you'll notice that the Jews actually went against the British. Aha. Oh, Ben, I'm gonna expose you for this one. You're not mentioning a couple of things that was very noteworthy. One of it is the Jewish insurgency in Mandatory Palestine, where the Zionists went against the British. Where is this, Ben? Where is this in your presentation? I mean, the paramilitary group called the Haganah and the Irgun later on, this resulted in the Haganah leading a Jewish insurgency against the British authorities in Palestine. This campaign included the paramilitaries bombing of bridges, railways, and ships used to deport illegal Jewish immigrants, as well as assisting in bringing more diaspora Jews to Palestine in defiance of British policies. Because the British were trying to control the immigration of Jews into Palestine, they proposed the 1937 Peel Commission. The Jews were not happy with it, so they didn't side with the British. In fact, they did this. They bombed bridges bridges and railways and ships and etc. And they deported illegal Jewish immigrants into Palestine. This was done by the Haganah. Another noteworthy event was the King David Hotel bombing. Now, the British administration headquarters for Mandatory Palestine, housed in the southern wing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, were bombed in a terrorist attack conducted by the Irgun, which left 91 people of various nationalities were killed, including Arabs, Britons, and Jews, and 46 were injured. The main motive of the bombing was to destroy documents incriminating the Jewish agency in attacks against the British. It was the deadliest attack directed at the British during the Mandate era. So where is this, Ben? Where is this portrayal? It's one of the deadliest attacks on Mandate authorities, on the British. So the Jews were in fact standing against the British. They were not siding against the British. And another noteworthy was the Deir Yassin massacre. The brutality of the Deir Yassin prompted thousands of Palestinians to flee just weeks before Israel was created. Zionist militias tore through Palestinian villages, massacring the villagers and expelling those who remained alive to clear the way for the creation of the state of Israel. An estimated 15,000 Palestinians were killed and hundreds of thousands fled their homes to live as refugees in other parts of Palestine or neighboring countries, an event known as Palestinians as the Nakba. So where was this, Ben? Where was this in your representation? And also the Plan Dalit, which was executed by the Haganah, which was the blueprint used by the new Israeli army and its militia forerunner to expel indigenous Palestinians from their homeland during Israel's establishment in 1948. Now, the Plan Dalit called for destruction of villages, setting fire to blowing up and planting mines in the debris, especially those population centers which are difficult to control continuously, mounting search and control operations according to the following guidelines: encircling of the village and conducting a search inside it. In the event of resistance, the armed force must be destroyed and the population must be expelled outside the borders of the state. 3/4 of all Palestinians, about 750,000 people, were forced from their homes and made refugees during Israel's establishment. So that should explain, Ben, that should explain how Israel, initially they were given this from the British. Upon independence, all of a sudden they got this plot of land. That should explain why or how they got it, because of the plans that they executed against the British. So where was this, Ben? Where was this?
In 1964, with the Arabs still in full control of the Gaza Strip and West Bank, the Palestine Liberation Organization was founded, calling for the destruction of Israel.
You can see how he phrased his words. In 1964, with the Arabs still full control of Gaza Strip and the West Bank. When prior to that, the Arabs were in full control of most of Palestine. But now he's smart. You see, he's smart in how he phrases his words.
Here is a contemporaneous British report on the first chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization.
One of the most extreme anti-Israeli politicians in the Arab world, Ahmed el-Shukeri, the leader of the Palestine Liberation Organization. As the spokesman for 1 million Palestine refugees, he's fanned the flames of hatred for Israel with unflagging energy.
How did 1 million refugees all of a sudden appear? You didn't mention anything before that. You didn't mention any events before that.
In 1967, the Arab League announced the 3 no's: no peace, no recognition, no negotiations. With all of Israel's enemies mobilizing against it, Israel launched a preemptive strike on the Egyptian Air Force, inaugurating the 1967 Six-Day War. This ended with...
Now, this is where I'm going to call out Ben Shapiro. Like, he's distorting historical facts, and he's smart in doing that. I'll give you that. He's smart in concealing the truth. Now, first, Ben mentioned the Arab League Summit, or what we call the Khartoum Resolution, in which Arab countries, they proposed the 3 no. No recognition of Israel, no negotiations with Israel, and no peace with Israel. Then he mentions about the Six-Day War. Now, if you check history, this resolution happened after the Six-Day War, not before. If you check history, this resolution happened on the 1st of September, 1967. Now, the Six-Day War happened on the 5th to the 10th of June, 1967. So Ben just distorted the timeline of history. I wonder why. Very interesting. Like, he's trying to say that the Arabs were the problem. This is how he's presenting history. He's trying to say, okay, fine, look, the Arabs doesn't want peace. They don't want peace. That's why Israel attacked them. But if you check history, the 3 no's were a result of the Six-Day War. But Ben distorts it. Come on, bro. Just ridiculous.
Israel gaining miraculously the Sinai Desert, the Golan Heights, the Gaza Strip, Judea and Samaria, now known as the West Bank, as well as the entirety of Jerusalem. In 1973, the Arabs launched all-out war again, this time on Yom Kippur. Israel survived and gained territory.
Israel survived and gained territory. Wow, what a way to put it.
In 1979, Israel gave the Sinai back to Egypt in return for peace. In 1993, Israel agreed to the Oslo Accords, which promised a step-by-step process to establish a Palestinian state.
Yeah, what happened to that, Ben? What happened to that? On top of that, this guy that proposed the Oslo Accords, he got assassinated. Now, the thing about these Oslo Accords is the Palestinians are promised a couple of things that were not given to them. Like the Oslo Accord, the agreements that happened in the Oslo Accords never even actualized.
In 1998, Israel conceded yet more territory to the Palestinian Authority under the prime ministership of Benjamin Netanyahu. In 2000, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak offered Yasser Arafat, the terrorist leader of the Palestinian Authority, 91% control over the West Bank in contiguous territory and an Israeli security presence along 15% of the border with Jordan. Arafat walked away from the table and began the Second Intifada, a massive terror wave that ended with the death of thousands of Jews.
Thousands of Jews, huh? Wait, you didn't mention how Palestinians were killed too. There were 5 times more fatalities on the Palestinian side. And then the prime minister at that point in time, Ariel Sharon, made a provocative visit to Al-Aqsa Mosque. And he said, the Temple Mount is in our hands and will remain in our hands. It is the holiest site of Judaism and it is the right of every Jew to visit the temple. And because of that, the people over there reacted. That was how the Second Intifada was caused. But to say that the Second Intifada was caused by Yasser Arafat is just pathetic. I mean, this guy just wants to blame everything on the Palestinians. It's just pathetic.
2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew from the Gaza Strip. Hamas immediately took it over and began using it as a base for terrorist activity. That continues until this day. In 2008, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert offered even more than Barak in terms of territory, with some land swaps to maintain Jewish-populated areas in exchange for some Israeli territory. Olmert even offered to relinquish Israeli sovereignty at the Temple Mount, the holiest site in Judaism, as well as the entire Old City of Jerusalem to a 5-member, non-sovereign international trusteeship comprising Israel, the PA, Jordan, the US, and Saudi Arabia. PA head Mahmoud Abbas walked away without a counteroffer. Myth number 3. Israel expelled all Palestinian Arabs from British Mandate Palestine. This is, again, a lie. Israel's founding documents asked Arabs to stay. Israel's Declaration of Independence, in the middle of an ongoing war with Arab nations, reads, quote, "We appeal, in the very midst of the onslaught launched against us now for months, to the Arab inhabitants of the State of Israel to preserve peace and participate in the upbuilding of the state on the basis of full and equal citizenship and due representation in all its provisional and permanent institutions." Debate has raged for decades over how many Arabs left the nascent State of Israel thanks to expulsion, and how many left because they were told to leave by their own leaders. An estimated 250,000 to 300,000 refugees left before their homes were even in a war zone.
Here's how I can catch him out. First, he said that Israel never expelled anyone. Now he's saying, let's listen to what he's saying.
State of Israel, thanks to expulsion, and how many left because they were told to leave by their own leaders. An estimated
Thanks to expulsion. Let's understand it carefully now. He gave us 2 options. He gave us 2 possibilities. Number 1, they were advised by the leaders to leave Israel. Second one, by expulsion. Now, who could have done that expulsion? Was it the British or the Jewish Zionist movement at that point of time? It couldn't have been the British, because the British, according to the mandate, the British will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, i.e. a national home for the Jews, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. So it couldn't have been the British that expelled Palestinians at that point in time. So I wonder who expelled them. It's so clear. It's so, I mean, history, it's, in the words of Ben, it's so, I mean, he's catching himself out. The Zionist movement was the one that expelled local Palestinians. It's so clear. The Nakba. The fact that you didn't mention it, it shows a lot. Now, the Nakba was the destruction of the Palestinian society and homeland in 1948 and the permanent displacement of a majority of the Palestinian Arabs. 700,000 Palestinians, half the Arab population of what was British-ruled Palestine, were dispossessed and displaced, many spilling into neighboring Arab states where many of their descendants remain.
An estimated 250,000 to 300,000 refugees left before their homes were even in a war zone.
We didn't compel them to leave. They left on their own will, or rather on the will of the Arab leaders who advised them even before trouble started.
Now that's David Ben-Gurion. So Ben is trying to say that, okay, we didn't expel them to leave, but I've already proven that you guys did. If you look at the original interview of David Ben-Gurion, you can see the part that Ben cut out, and you'll see why he cut that out. Let's look at the original, shall we?
On the Arab refugees, the refugees say they want to come back to their lands. Are you prepared to allow them to resettle?
Well, if they want to come back to their lands, I don't see the reason why they left their land. We didn't compel them to leave. They left on their own will, or rather on the will of the Arab leaders. And meanwhile, the land was settled by refugees Jewish refugees from Arab countries, and by Jewish refugees, the remnant of the 6 million slaughtered by Nazis. And they cannot come back unless we expel those from these countries. We are not going to do that.
Can you see the part where Ben left out? Where David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of the Jewish state, he mentions that there is no law of return for the Palestinians. There is no law of return. They cannot come back. Now, the question is, if they were not expelled by Israel, why were they not allowed to come back? That's a question to ask. I mean, it's so obvious. The answer is so obvious. You guys expelled them out.
The collapse of Arab society during the 1947-48 war, leaving many Arabs without a means of support, has been well documented.
Israel will do everything in its power to help the resettlement of these refugees by paying compensation and by other means.
Hundreds of thousands of these refugees ended up in the West Bank and Gaza, which remained Arab territory until 1967. Furthermore, Arab nations refused to take in hundreds of thousands of Arabs, turning their co-religionists into refugees who have maintained that status for literally decades, a situation unparalleled in human history. Fully 62% of such refugees live outside the West Bank and Gaza Strip, according to the UN RWA.
So he's trying to say that Arab countries didn't take Palestinian refugees. But now he's saying this, 62% outside of West Bank and Gaza Strip, which is other Arab countries. According to the UN RWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, nearly 1/3 of the registered Palestine refugees, more than 1.5 million individuals, live in 58 recognized Palestine refugee camps in Jordan, Lebanon, the Syrian Arab Republic, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. So they got out. They left and they moved to other countries. I mean, this accusation of Arab countries not taking in refugee, it's cap.
Meanwhile, Israel, tiny Israel, took in over 800,000 Jews expelled from Arab lands between 1948 and 1951 and never asked for land to be returned to those Jews.
What? Because you were populating the land of Palestine with Jews. You wanted them to come to Palestine. You even have the law of return that you give to Jewish citizens. Again, he's trying to blame the Arabs on this. He's trying to say, oh, they don't really want to help their own Arab brothers. But look at us Jews. We accept Jewish refugees into Palestine. Because you guys were trying to populate the entire land of Palestine for yourself. That's what Ben is trying to tell you. He's just being choosy and specific with his words.
Myth number 4. Israel is an apartheid state. Israel is most certainly not an apartheid state. Arab citizens of Israel have the same rights as Jewish citizens. 20% of all citizens of Israel are Arab.
Just by saying that 20% of all population in Israel is Arab, it doesn't prove that you're not an apartheid state. Anyone can claim, oh, we have 20% of other races in our country. We're not an apartheid. Apartheid is not limited to the number of population or the percentage of population. It's how you treat people.
The vast majority of Palestinians live under Palestinian rule in the West Bank. All Arabs in the Gaza Strip lived under Hamas rule.
What kind of Palestinian rule are you referring to? Like the Palestinians that live in the West Bank, they don't have full control. The PLO, they don't have full control of the West Bank. Everybody knows this. They don't even have their own military. Israel is the one that's controlling the military in the West Bank, which is supposed to be land for the Palestinians. So many checkpoints that were established by the Israel state in the West Bank. And don't get me started on Gaza. I mean, you guys have an entire blockade that you guys established on Gaza. And the fact that you guys control the water, the food that goes in there, the electricity that goes in Gaza, it proves that you guys are controlling Gaza. There's no full control for the Palestinian in Gaza. There's an entire blockade, a land, sea, and air blockade by the Israeli government on Gaza.
Israel's population, again, is 20% Arab. Arab parties have sat in the Israeli government, and Arab sits on Israel's Supreme Court. There are 0 Jews living under Palestinian rule. The only apartheid state is any state of Palestine.
What? Okay, this is this is funny. You want to know why? Because he's trying to say that there's no Jews in places other than Israel. So he's referring to Gaza and the West Bank. There's no Jews there. So then he makes the statement. So the only apartheid state is everywhere else, i.e. Gaza and West Bank, other than Israel. You need for a state, okay, fine, I'm going to compose myself. For a state to be considered an apartheid, you need a minimum of 2 ethnicities. One has dominion over the other. If you have a place that has only one ethnicity, you don't call it an apartheid, you call it an ethno-state.
All of these myths have consequences. All of these lies have consequences. They lead to a pseudo-sophisticated context that allows for the murder of Jews. It allows people in the West to believe that The grievances that are openly articulated by the Palestinian Authority, Islamic Jihad, and Hamas are actually about territory. Hamas openly calls for the murder of every Jew in the region. The Palestinian Authority gives actual bounty.
This is pathetic. I mean, he's not gonna admit that the Israel is an apartheid state. There's so many proofs. You can refer to Amnesty's report. I'll put the link in the description below, where you can read a 4-year work of research proving that Israel is an apartheid state. They literally have roads or highways with walls. Palestinians can only use one side of the road, and Israelis can use the other side of the road, which is pathetic. According to Terrestrial Jerusalem, officially called Route 4370, this stretch of road is better known as the Apartheid Road due to the 8-meter high wall running down its center. The purpose of that wall to relegate Palestinian traffic to the 2-lane sealed highway on the east leading around Jerusalem. It says, the entry to Jerusalem through the eastern road is allowed to all those who have a legal entry permit, regardless of their nationality, religion, ethnic, or racial background. Now, this is when it sounds funny. All Israelis, regardless of background or religion, can pass freely in and out of Israel, while Palestinians from the West Bank need specific permits issued by Israeli authorities. So they have roads specific for Palestinians and specific for Israelis. How is that not apartheid? Bibi Netanyahu himself says that Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people and them alone. According to UN News, Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory is apartheid. This is according to UN rights experts. They say the independent rights expert added that Israel's military rule in occupied Palestinian territory has been deliberately built with the intent of enduring facts on the ground to demographically engineer a permanent and illegal Israel sovereign claim over occupied territory, while confining Palestinians in smaller and more confined reserves in disconnected land. He also mentioned that leading internal figures, including former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor, and former Israeli Attorney General Michael Ben-Yair, have also all described Israel's occupation as apartheid. So you're capping, Ben. You're capping Ben Shapiro. I mean, you guys even have roads that screams apartheid. For example, we have the Al Shuhada Street, also known as the Apartheid Street by Palestinians. So it's so obvious that Israel is an apartheid regime. There's no questions about it. Even Israelis themselves say that it is an apartheid regime. So that was a rundown of Ben Shapiro's video. I'm not going to finish the video because it's annoying. You can see how he distorts history, how he presents inaccurate information, how he leaves out notable events that happen in history. I hope this video has been beneficial for you guys, and how important it is to stay honest in our representation and our delivery or recollection of history. It's very unfair and dishonest towards knowledge when someone does this. For someone to present this information like this, I mean, it's just ridiculous. So Ben Shapiro, I hope this video is a good response to you. You got some reading to do. You got some studying to do, bro. If you like this video, if you like this first series of the IDF series, Intellectual Discourse series, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. So tune in to the next episode on the IDF series. Inshallah, we'll be posting more content soon. Okay, peace. I just need to lie down.